Router tables are essential for working with small stock, but not everyone has the space for one. Let me show you a simple solution. A benchtop router table held in place with a single bolt. With just a piece of plywood, a couple supports and a hole in your bench, you'll be up and running in no time. This is an onion project, so if you're interested in some advanced features, check out the website or the description for free additional add-ons. Let's get started. The materials for this are pretty simple. I've got 2 hardboard pieces here, as well as a piece of plexiglass and a piece of plywood. I have 2 hex bolts up here. You only need to have 1. It's just going to depend on the size of the hole in your table. This is a 3/4 inch, which is the size of my holes, and this is a 5/8. I don't suggest going any lower than 3/8 of an inch. You'll also notice that there's a little bit of threading on the end. We're actually going to cut this off because we don't want this to cut into the hole every time we add it and take it out. We really just want this smooth shaft right here. You'll need a rabbet bit as well as a center point bit. I've got my base over here. I've taken the plate off the bottom, and this will just help me to line this up so that I've got it centered right. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with the base itself. I need to now cut out a square in the center for the router. So I want to set this to 2¼ inches to get my border that will go around the sides. I'm using a marking gauge here. You don't have to use a marking gauge to do this. At 2¼ inches, I'm going to come in here and just draw my line. I'm going to come in from the edge and I'm going to go in 9 3/4 of an inch right there. And then I'll do the other side. Now, if you've gotten ahead of me and tried to fit your plastic in the center, you're going to find that this is not 8 inches by 8 inches. And that's where the 1/4 inch rabbeting bit will come in. Once we've cut the square out with the bandsaw, we'll come back with a rabbeting bit, and that will give us a 1/4 inch around the sides, which will give us 8 inches by 8 inches altogether. We'll cut this out with the bandsaw, but we're going to run into a couple problems. First of all, no matter what we do, we can't take the bandsaw blade, cut it in half, drill a hole out, and put the blade back together. We're going to have to cut from the edge into the inside here. We're going to do that right up here, where later on we'll have supports that will help to close this up. But the second problem that we're going to have with the bandsaw is that we need to be able to turn this to make our next cuts in each one of these corners. I'll be using my 3/4 inch bandsaw blade because it cuts straighter. So in each of these corners, I'm going to come in at 1 1/8 to drill holes out that will allow me to, again, maneuver later on. To keep myself straight, I added a line. The downside to skipping a prototype is the risk of making adjustments mid-project. I shifted my cut from the bottom edge closer to the center to strengthen the side. You might be wondering why I didn't just use a jigsaw. It's because I wanted to complete this project with as few power tools as possible, specifically for those who may not have many power tools. If you are going to cut with the bandsaw, I recommend measuring 3 1/4 inches from this edge, or if you have a jigsaw, you can skip this cut entirely. You'll see this base being used up until I correct it in a few minutes. I think what I'm going to do, because I don't want to worry about the panel not fitting later on, is to overcut it just a little bit. So I'm just going to go over my pencil just a little bit on the other side of it instead of staying on the inside. But let's go ahead and do that now. For this project, I'm going to add another dog hole to my bench. You could run out and buy a 3/4 inch brad point bit like this. The problem is that you might have a hard time finding a drill that will accept something like this. The drill that I have accepts a 1/2 inch bit. That's a pretty big drill to make a hole like this. So instead of going with this, we're going to do something really simple with a spade bit. Now, spade bits are very difficult to keep straight. So I've created a jig for this that will make this just a whole lot easier to do it. To make the jig to do this, I've got 2 different pieces here. They both come from a 4x4, but basically my larger section here is just big enough for my spade bit to fit inside of here. And then my second piece will actually reference the top, which will give me a straight hole all the way down. So I'm going to insert this through here first, and then I'll attach it to the top. I can set the spade bit to my pre-marked hole, and mine is just about 2 3/8 altogether. Now I can place this inside of my awl hole like that and clamp it down. Now I can take the screws out, take this piece off and clamp it down again. And just to make sure that this is straight, I'm gonna make sure that this is lined up, and it looks like I'm doing pretty good. Can always move this around a little bit. So right there and right there. We'll slide this in, and that fits really well. To connect this to the bench, I'm gonna need to obviously drill out a hole on this side. Now, I really wanna make sure that this is all flush all the way across. So to do that, I need to countersink the end of my bolts. The next thing I need to do is mark over 2 3/8 from my edge with the largest section here. I've got my marking gauge set at 2 3/8. And now I can find my center, which is right there. I've set the thickness of my cap there. I'll bring this down and line it up so I don't go below that, and I'll lock it in place. Now I can switch to 3/4 of an inch and finish it up. Now it's time to add the supports to the base. We're going to start this off by measuring half the distance of our pieces and then coming in 1.5 inches on the base. We can connect both points on both pieces now, and we'll cut these off with the bandsaw. We'll add some glue to this top of the support. Just going to add a little tiny bit of salt, a few grains to keep it from sliding around. I'm going to add my first piece, just put 1 clamp on for right now. And I'll add the second one on the other side. And as you can see, this would not work at all. I need to push each of these pieces back before I can clamp them down. Once I get everything in place, I can add a second clamp. I want to make sure that this side is pushed all the way up against the edge, as well as this side. A little front heavy right now, so I'm just going to add a little bit of weight to the back. We'll give this some time to dry and we'll come back. I've let this dry now, and initially I was a little upset because I found I had all this rocking with it. I couldn't figure it out until I looked at my sides and realized that my tabletop has a slant to it. So the problem lies within this section right here, and you can see that it's there's a little bit of a gap. To fix mine, I just created some wedges. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue these pieces in, and that should take care of the problem. I can also add a piece of stock here to close up the gap. While that's drying, I need to find the center of my plexiglass, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I've still got my plastic wrap on mine. I'm going to connect the points, and I'm going to find the center like this. I'll add my plate back on here, but I'm only going to use a couple screws for now. And as you can see, I've got my V-groove bit in, and I'll use it to find the center on the top. So it looks like right there's my center. I'll come in here with a marker now and just mark around the perimeter. We need to decide where we're going to mount this on the plate. In my jig, my plexiglass will fit like this. And because the knob is going to be the most important part of raising and lowering everything, I want that to obviously be out front. So this is what mine's going to look like inside of the jig. I need to make 2 marks now, one that's going to be on the plastic part and one that's going to be on the plexiglass. Now I can put the base on here, but we're going to make sure that we have this flipped over like it would have been on the router. And you can see my marks here. I'll line these up and then make sure that I'm lined up around the perimeter. I'm adding clamps because these 2 surfaces are very slippery and it's hard to do anything with it otherwise. I found that a 13/64 brad point bit is going to be the closest to the holes that I have in here that I need to drill. So that's what I've got chucked up. And I'm not looking to drill all the way through, just enough to leave a mark. At the drill press, I've chucked in a 1/16 inch twist drill bit, and I've put it really far inside of the chuck. That way I don't flex it and bend it later on. And I'm just going to go over each one of these holes and drill all the way through to the other side. Brad point bits are not good with drilling all the way through things. You can end up cracking things later on, so I just want to use this to get me all the way through. The best way I've found to drill these out is using a center drill bit. Again, everything will be on the website, but I'm going to chuck this in. You'll obviously want to make sure that you get the right taper for your screws. And of course, this is where we laid it down. So I want to flip it over to the back side. And I'm just going to drill each one of these out, being really careful not to drill too far. Now I can peel these off. Now I'll line this up in the direction that I want it to go, which is going to be right there. And now I can add my screws. That looks pretty good. One thing I forgot to do is to drill out the center, so let's take this back to the drill press. If you remember the mark that we made with the V-groove bit, we're just going to follow up with it now. We'll clean this up a little bit. And we're done. With this put together, I'll take this off and I need to add my rabbeting bit. And this is a 1/4 inch rabbeting bit. The easiest way to get this to the right thickness that I've found is just to use the plate that we cut it from originally. And I'm going to line this up till I can feel that top of the blade. And that feels good right there. I'll place this over the top now and mark each of the corners because they will need to be cut out with a chisel. If you're slightly off when you put this in here, you might consider coming back and just rounding the surface off just a little bit so that you don't have any problem when you run your stock across the surface. To use it at this point, it's pretty simple. We're going to drop our cord in. And then we'll drop this in and we're gonna make sure we're going the right way. My lift is right here. So this is gonna go on like this and we're ready to go. Now I will point out that the only thing you're gonna wanna use with this is something with a bearing. If you go with something without a bearing, you're gonna have a problem because you have nothing to reference the router to. But if you do plan on using this with something that doesn't have a bearing on it, it's really simple. You can add your own fence to the back side and this will give you something for your wood to reference as you use it. You'll just want to add a couple clamps to the back and you're ready to go. I do have some advanced things that I want to add to this, so keep your eyes out. I'm going to have some things in the next little while. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment down below, and if you do, thank my patrons that help keep this thing going. It means a lot to me. And remember to keep making things.